I discovered 3 true terrifying dreams that shattered reality, revealing the dark secrets within. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, the chill swept over me like a ghost whispering my name. Standing in my living room, I felt the normal hum of life fade away. It was just another quiet Saturday, or so I thought. Shadows danced in the corners, creeping closer, as if they breathed my fears. The air felt thick, like I was trying to breathe underwater. I could hear subtle whispers, too quiet to understand, but right there on the edge of hearing. I glanced around, scanning my familiar space family photos on the walls, the couch where I curled up with books. Was it all an illusion? The darkness pressed in. I felt it, that tightness in my chest, like a hand around my heart. Then came the first noise. A soft thud. My stomach dropped. It echoed in my ears, reverberating through the silence. I turned, adrenaline pumping, only to see nothing. Just shadows. My thoughts spiraled. What lurked beyond my reality? Suddenly, a picture frame fell from the wall, crashing to the floor. Glass shattered, and I jumped, skin prickling with fear. Was it me? Did I cause it? Fear coursed through my veins. I could barely move, frozen like prey. I stepped further into the darkness, drawn by something I couldn't see. The temperature dropped. A bitter chill cut through my shirt, making me shiver. My breath came out in quick puffs, misting in the air. Shadows whispered again, louder now, swirling around me, mocking my confusion. Every corner of my room felt sinister. The clock ticked, loud and unsteady, its sound warped like it struggled against time itself. I swore I could hear my pulse in my ears, steady and relentless, drumming a warning. The shadows seemed to move on their own, elongating and twisting, and I saw a figure lurking at the edge of my vision. Is someone there? My voice trembled. That door I opened might as well have led to hell itself. Heart racing, I moved forward, drawn in by an unshakable pull. A sudden silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Then, from the darkened corner of my eye, it came in outline, shifting like liquid midnight. My breath caught in my throat, a lump of terror. And just as I took a step back, it lunged forward, the shadows consuming my world. I screamed. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The scream echoed into a suffocating silence, swallowed whole by the shadows looming around me. The darkness wasn't just absence, it was alive, hungry, wrapping itself around my thoughts and pulling me deeper into a nightmare I couldn't escape. My heart thundered against my ribs, erratic and wild, echoing the fear etched on my face. As the dark figure lunged, I stumbled back, hitting the wall with a jarring thud that echoed through the desolate air. But the impact didn't hurt, it felt like a gentle push from some invisible force, urging me to surrender. The shadows roared with a cacophony of whispers, growing louder, coiling around my mind like a serpent, tightening, squeezing out rational thought. What do you want? I gasped, the words grappling for existence in the tumult of dread. The shadow hesitated, its form flickering like a faulty light bulb. Then, just as quickly, it dissolved, revealing only the chill that lingered in its wake. I was utterly alone again, but I could feel those whisper-sarsing tendrils of malice that tugged at my sanity. Panic surged through me. If this was reality, then what gruesome nightmare waited beyond? Stepping cautiously away from the wall, I strained to listen, seeking clarity in the chaos. But clarity didn't come. It never did. Instead, the whispers formed a clear phrase, overlapping voices pleading and warning in agony. It's not over, it's not over. I stumbled forward, propelled by a sick mixture of fear and curiosity, and found my feet guiding me toward the staircase. It stood dark and inviting, like a beast waiting in shadowy repose, convinced that I would heed its call. With each step, the whispers transformed into something more vivid. They morphed into fragments of my past laughter, arguments, the creaking of floorboards beneath the weight of fleeting memories. I tried to break free of the emotional tether, but it drew me into my own history. A twisted part of me sought connection among the horror. Reaching the top, the hallway felt like a corridor of doom. Every door stood ajar, swaying ever so slightly as if they invited me to enter. Go into the past, face your fears, they seemed to say. I was ensnared. One door, slightly ajar with a faint white light spilling out, beckoned me. An unearthly glow, a whisper of hope, or a siren's call into despair? You have to know, a voice whispered so sweetly, it made my skin crawl. My hands trembled as I pushed the door open, light bathing me in warmth. But more than warmth, it brought visions, memories ignited like fire in my mind. Inside, I saw my childhood bedroom, eerily untouched. The bedspread still adorned with cartoon characters, and toys were scattered across the floor, relics of innocence. But shadows lingered, curling in the crevices of the room. Pictures, me family huddled together, smiles frozen in time hung crookedly on the walls, faces distorted like reflections in a funhouse mirror. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted something crawling. A shadowy silhouette slithered from the closet, inching toward me, features unclear but form unmistakable, the image of a child, pale and forlorn, eyes void of life. I recoiled, horrified, realizing it wasn't just any child, it was me. Help me, it intoned, a voice rasping like scratching glass that cut deep into my psyche. The shadows swirled, thickening as if conjuring ancient sorrows that dripped through the air. Desperately, I slammed the door shut and stumbled back into the hallway, gasping for breath. But it was too late. The air felt heavier, and distortions pulsed through the dim light. Behind me, I heard 1,000 faint footsteps resounding like thunder, reverberating off the walls surrounding me. The little girl's face lingered in my thoughts, growing clearer, more vivid, as the whispers escalated into anguished cries. I turned quickly, desperate to flee, but the hall stretched infinitely, walls closing in, suffocating in their embrace. Then, a figure stood at the far end, cloaked in darkness but with those same hollow eyes, a wordless promise of despair and recognition. With a final scream trapped in my throat, I faced it, realizing it was not just me, but something far worse, a collective dread that embodied my past, my fears, pulsating in the darkness. And as it took a step forward, I felt the ground beneath me shift, crumbling away, pulling me into the void. I reached for anything beyond that portal of nightmares, only to find nothing but an unyielding chasm. The whispers grew louder, crescendoing into a fever pitch, drowning me in chaos as I tumbled into the dark. The last thing I saw was that child's face, now twisted in torment, reflecting my own, a haunting mirror of the monster I couldn't escape. Then, blackness swallowed me whole. The darkness hung around me like a thick fog, oppressive and heavy, as though the very air conspired to drown me. I floated in an abyss, suspended between nightmares, while the echo of those tortured whispers assaulted me from every angle. It's not over, they hissed with a venomous familiarity that gnawed deeper into my soul. I was trapped in a maze of anguish, where every twisting thought doubled back on itself, leading only to further despair. That I inhaled, expecting the stale taste of dread, but instead, a fresh scent assailed my senses, a hint of damp earth mingled with the faint sweetness of decay. Curiosity sparked beneath the weight of fear, igniting a flicker of resolve. With a sudden surge of will, I plunged forward into the void, the sensation of movement both exhilarating and terrifying. The pulsating shadows pulled at me, urging me to surrender, but I pushed through, determined to confront whatever lay ahead. The ground solidified beneath me, and I found myself standing in a dimly lit cellar, the stone walls slick with moisture and oozing an unseen dread. The loaded silence was broken only by the soft drip of water somewhere in the shadows, echoing in my skull like a taunting heartbeat. An ancient wooden table dominated the center, its surface marred with scars and the remnants of unspeakable acts. what drew my gaze weren't just the scrapes and stains, but an assortment of trinkets scattered across the table, each more grotesque than the last: a child's broken toy, a wilted flower entwined with dried strands of hair, and, chillingly, a small glass jar filled with what I could only assume were shreds of someone's fervent despair. The contents glimmered under the flickering light, as if promising a view into the soul of its own, a glimpse into the madness that had unfolded here. In the corner of my eye, movement stirred. I turned slowly, heart pounding against my ribcage, and discovered a mirror, dark and cracked, leaning against the wall. The glass was shrouded in grime and cobwebs, its surface barely reflecting the murky light, but in the fractured depths, I could make out a figure shifting, looming just outside of perception, the slightest flicker of motion that sent icy tendrils wrapping around my spine. I approached, breathlessly entranced by my own reflection. But it wasn't just me staring back. In the deeper shadows, the child appeared again, her ghostly fingers outstretched, pleading but full of sorrow. "Help me," she wept, her voice a faint echo of lost childhood, sent chilling shivers deep into my core. I reached out instinctively, my fingertips brushing the surface of the mirror. The moment they made contact, visions exploded behind my eyes, flashes of fragments that were both alien and familiar. Darkened hallways, damp earth, echoes of laughter turned to screams, the harrowing feeling of chasing something always just out of reach. The memories bled into each other, coiling around my mind like a viper ready to strike. A bone-chilling crack shattered the silence as the mirror splintered, sending shards flying like miniature daggers. A scream bubbled up from within me, but it was lost amid the chaos as the glass shards transformed, sprouting limbs and writhing like tortured souls, clawing their way out of the remnants of memory. The figures were no longer confined to the mirror's prison, they surged out, twisting and contorting with anguished cries, dragging me into their torment. "Join us," they beckoned in a chorus of grief-stricken voices, the words resonating deep with an unfathomable sorrow that threatened to suffocate me. I staggered back, colliding with the icy stone, trying to find my footing in the churning chaos. Here were faces I recognized yet didn't, lost children of my past, the reflection of my deepest neglect, and regrets too heavy to bear. In the overwhelming swirl of voices, one stood out above the rest: me own. "You left us. You abandoned us." It shrieked, the weight of conviction sending a shudder through my chest. "We didn't deserve it, no. I didn't mean to," I cried, tears mingling with the rancid air. But the figures advanced, twisting their bodies in unnatural angles, merging into one wretched mass of grief and despair. Their hollow eyes bore into me, accusing and relentless. Then, just as I thought I would be consumed entirely, silence fell. The shadows recoiled momentarily, and the cellar shivered with an acute tension that made my bones ache. I was left gasping for air, my heart racing as the pain in my chest ignited a visceral fear gripped tighter by the cold vice of dread. Beneath this silence, however, I sensed something unfurling, a ripple of energy that vibrated against the dark corners of the cellar, drawing my eyes again to the mirror, now splintered but glimmering with a sinister promise. Through the cracks, I caught fleeting glimpses of another realm, a glimpse of reality twisted beyond recognition. It beckoned me with an unholy allure, drawing me closer. As I ventured nearer, the shards began to rearrange, taking shape and forming a doorway, a portal dripping with the remnant sorrows of the past. Each fragment twinkled like lost dreams, taunting me to cross over into the maelstrom waiting just beyond. The ground trembled. I felt the energy pulsating beneath me, begging, demanding I make a choice. I could feel what lay on the other side, more than just an escape, but revelations waiting to tear apart the very fabric of my existence. Do you want to see? They whispered, their voices an irresistible promise wrapped in dread, and as I reached out, the world around me exploded, a relentless surge of darkness consuming everything I knew, and I knew then that whatever awaited me through that doorway would shatter the boundaries of reality forever. With heart racing, I stepped forward, teetering on the edge of a precipice that promised both salvation and damnation. The moment before crossing the threshold, a scream erupted, not from my lips, but from behind me, a wail familiar and filled with betrayal. "Don't leave me behind." I turned just as the shadows lunged toward me again, their wrath ignited, knowing full well that I might very well unleash something far worse than the horrors that haunted my past. Everything went black. I stood in an inky void, the silence stretching into infinity, deafening and claustrophobic. The sensation of falling gripped my insides, the weight of eternity pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. I strained to call out, but my voice was swallowed by the expanse, leaving only the ragged rhythm of my breaths echoing in my ears. Then, out from the darkness, a whisper curled around me like smoke, delicate yet insidious, a haunting sigh that morphed into a name, Lila. The very syllables sent tremors through my core, igniting fragments of memory that rushed back with visceral Clarissa forgotten lullaby, a sense of pure love entwined with an unspeakable loss. My heart raced anew, torn between the joyous echoes of childhood and the oppressive longing that clutched at my throat. Lila, I murmured, my voice quaking. The name felt like a spell, conjuring images of a child I couldn't fully remember but ached to hold once more. A flicker of light pierced the gloom ahead, a promise wrapped in uncertainty, and I felt drawn toward it, each step tentative as the ground beneath me pulsed with disquietude. As I drew closer, the light flickered, revealing a figure standing in the shadows. My heart lurched as I recognized her, though she appeared different, more ethereal. Lila, my little sister, her expression a mixture of joy and pain. Her eyes shone but held a deep well of sorrow that pierced through me. Help me, please, she pleaded, her voice a melancholic melody sweetened with innocence. Am lost in the dark. I surged forward, reaching for her small hand, but before I could grasp it, a wave of darkness erupted around her, swallowing her whole. Panic rose within me. Lila. No. I thrust my hands into the void, desperate, stretching my fingers where I last saw her, but only shadows grasped me, tendrils cold and unforgiving. Find me. Her voice floated softly from the depths, a haunting echo that froze my blood. You left me behind. Fury ignited in my chest, raw and alive. I didn't. I searched, but in that scream of denial, reality warped under the weight of untruths. The shadows wriggled around me, coiling tighter like serpents, and suddenly, I was thrown backward, hurtling through a tunnel of memories reeking of despair. The vision struck with breathtaking intensity. Dark halls of our old home spilled forth, crowded with echoes of repressed laughter, warm embraces twisted into shrieks of anguish. Images of our parents flashed, their expressions contorted in anguish, muttering prayers mixed with accusations. You didn't protect her. It's your fault. The weight of guilt pressed upon my chest, the shadows whispering my failures, each word a shard embedded deeper, festering like an open wound. I felt the lava of shame rise as I recalled the day I let her venture alone into the woods, a place we both had always been warned to avoid. The trees had whispered then too, calling us away from safety, but traversing through the dark corridor of thoughts left me paralyzed, grasping at soot-stained memories that clawed my will to move. You can't escape. The shadows shrieked. She will always belong to us. With a forceful rush, I broke free, stumbling into the flickering light ahead, fully expecting to be rebuffed by the haunting emptiness once more. Instead, I found myself in an eerily familiar room, our childhood bedroom transformed into a grotesque homage to what once was a chaotic swirl of stuffed animals with unblinking eyes, their stitched mouths closed tight, as if holding vicious secrets. In the corner where our shared bed stood, I noticed Lila's toy chest, now ajar. A low hum reverberated from within, signaling a presence trapped in the shadows of its contents. The room began to cascade into memories, swirling around me like a whirling dervish, every cherished moment intertwining with the darker facets I had tried to forget. Lila's laughter wrinkled into echoes of grief, and I bolted toward the toy chest, feeling a compulsion I could hardly resist. As I leaned down, the humming crescendoed into a dissonant wail. I couldn't help but pry it open fully, my fingers trembling with trepidation. The chest was filled not with beloved toys but remnants of my past, each item an unacknowledged piece of my sorrow. A shattered porcelain doll lay among them, its glassy eyes reflecting the hurt I had buried, shattered dreams boiling to the surface. As I sifted through, something larger shifted within. The chest trembled violently, threatening to burst open. And then, darkness surged from within, a malevolent force that exploded outward. A whirlwind of ghosts erupted from the chest, their forms familiar yet unrecognizable, faces warped by love and loss, swarming around me with feverish desperation. "You abandoned us," they wailed. "You must make a choice." Instinctively, I shielded my face, retreating once again, but the amalgamating shapes intensified, closing in with piercing eyes that wept grief and envy. The cacophony escalated to a fever pitch, drowning out my logic, drowning down to despair, threatening to consume every remnant of my will. Tension compressed around me as I clawed for escape. "I'm sorry," I screamed, though deep down, I felt the fracture lines of the truth. I realized I wasn't merely saving Lila, I was ensnared in a web of forgotten responsibility. Each face around me demanded reckoning, and the darkness coalescing promised that if I didn't confront the truth of my past, I would be swept into its depths forever. With every ounce of resolve, I screamed into the tempest, "I will find you, Lila. I swear," but the shadows twisted violently, flooding in like a tidal wave. Just as it swallowed me whole, I felt something slipping away, a cool sensation, an unrelenting pull dragging me into an abyss. A voice, softer now, whispered, "But at what cost?" In that moment, I braced for impact, knowing that this time, I might not return. Everything vanished, leaving me with a single thought spiraling through the void. The darkness had finally come for me, and the reckoning had just begun. Falling into the depths felt like plunging through sheets of ice, and I gasped for air that wouldn't come. Each second in that void stretched endlessly, the darkness constricted around me, granulating into sharper shards that pierced my skin and buried deep inside. Among the pain, a whisper slithered past my ears, the chilling echo of Lilith's voice reverberating through the murk. "You have to see, you have to remember." Light flared abruptly, blinding and disorienting, and I was hurled into the middle of a forest. The towering trees loomed ominously, their trunks gnarled and twisted as if reaching desperately for the heavens. A suffocating fog danced among the roots, coiling around my legs as if anchoring me in place. Something pulled at the edges of my consciousness, a familiar weight hidden beneath the undercurrents of memory. That I stumbled through the foliage, my breath coming in quick gasps, each exhalation mingling with the damp chill. The scent of decay encircled me like a shroud. I caught sickening whiffs that hinted at something that should have died long ago. A low, guttural growl erupted from the shadows, reverberating through the air. My heartbeat quickened, pulsing in sync with the foreboding sounds that surrounded me. I dropped to my knees, aching for a connection to home, to Lila. And then, as though summoned by my despair, I caught a flicker of movement in the distancia, silhouette that mirrored the graceful shape of a child. My pulse surged, hope clawing against my fear as I sprang back to my feet. "Lila," I called, a brittle intermingling of longing and panic erupting from within. Just as I moved toward the figure, the trees seemed to shift, twisting their branches as if trying to shield the creature away, drawing back into the shadows like a curtain falling over the stage of horror. "Lila," I shouted again, leaping forward, but the ground opened beneath me. I tumbled down a steep incline, plunging deeper into the grotesque heart of the forest. Branches clawed at me, tearing through my clothes and skin, urging me back to the surface, yet I was compelled to push deeper, driven by desperation. The darkness was alive, a thin, pulsing heartbeat thrumming beneath the surface of the earth, beckoning to be uncovered. When I finally landed with a bone-jarring thud, a deafening silence consumed me once again, and all at once, the air grew still. My heart choked against my throat, the shadows closing in around me. I scrambled to stand, brushing the dirt from my ragged clothes. Awareness settled on me like a cloak, heavy with the knowledge that this place was a graveyard of forgotten memories, each patch of earth ripe with the last breaths of those who had come before. I took a tentative step, and the ground groaned beneath my weight, alive with anticipation, and then disbelief coursed through me. A familiar shape blossomed in the dirt, revealing a delicate tree, its branches heavy with blossoms. But these weren't mere petals, they were faces twisted in agony, trapped in an eternal scream, their roots digging deep into the darkness, feeding on sorrow. Suddenly, clarity struck me like a dagger's thrust. These were not just memories, these were the manifestations of my guilt, the broken souls of those I had failed. And oh, no, no, I whispered, my throat closing as horror washed over me. This can't be real, but the ground shuddered as each face turned toward me, eyes tormented and filled with grief. "You left us all behind," they whispered in a chorus, a sound that drifted like smoke along the mountain winds. Each voice bore the weight of accusation, intertwined with the regrets I had buried so deeply. The roots wound toward me, sharp thorns piercing my ankles, a binding that held me firmly in place. Then, a flicker across the shadows caught my attention, a movement gliding amongst the trees. I turned to see her again, Lila, standing just beyond reach, her small frame illuminated by a ghostly light. Her mouth moved, but no sound emerged. Fear wrapped its icy fingers around my heart as I realized she was beckoning me deeper into a grove festooned with flower-shaped apparitions. It was the remains of the playhouse where she had spent countless afternoons. "Lila. I'm coming." I called desperately, but instead of warmth, a hollow sensation filled the space between us. The forest trembled as a thunderous roar erupted from within its depths, a horrible crescendo threatening to engulf everything in darkness. I jerked back as the tree faces screeched, twisted mouths opening wide, revealing not just pain, but fierce malice. Then a voice cascading from the ebon canopy above like the fall of an executioner's blade pierced through the cacophony. "You want her back, then pay the price." The ground quaked, as an underlying current of malevolence swirled about me, converging with an evil intent that tasted of ash and despair. No. I screamed, lurching forward, desperate to reach Lila. But just as I would have grasped her small hand, the ground beneath me peeled away like the skin from a fruit, the abyss yawning open, swallowing both Lila and me whole. The scream that burrowed into my chest worked its way outward, but it had been silenced in the cacophony of torment. Everything blurred. A flash of intense light followed by a darkness so oppressive it stung, enveloping me entirely. And while I flailed within the void, I felt an unshakable presence nearby, its whisper coiling tighter around my mind. "You can never truly leave." Just before I was consumed, a dreadful realization settled in. The memories I sought to escape had decided it was time to claim their due, and with that unnerving thought, I was plunged deep into a spiraling nightmare, on the precipice between truth and terror, where the worst was still yet to come. Flashes of memory overcame me, suffusing my consciousness with remnants of light. Each jarring image splintered my mind, fragments of Lila and the forest intertwining in a grotesque waltz. I saw our afternoons spent laughing beneath the splintered beams of the playground, the sweet tang of lemonade after long days of carefree play, her laughter ringing like a melody. But each moment quickly twisted, dissolving into shadows rife with reminders of abandonment and loss. Then came the rumble, a low growl vibrating through the air, resonating with dread. Time lost its meaning as I floated in that nothingness, teetering on the edge of nightmares, my senses heightened with fear. I felt something was watching me, an invisible gaze prickling against my skin. The fear clawed deeper, replicating the binding thorns that still clung tightly to my ankles, an unwelcome reminder that escape would come at a price. As I drifted through the dark chamber of my mind, visions swirled around me. The forest began to distort, the trees warping until they bled into grotesque forms, their limbs lashings of despair, faces emerging from the bark with their mouths silently screaming horror. They twisted around me, tangible yet insubstantial, a haunting reminder of the boundaries between the living and the shadowed realm I now inhabited. "Why have you come?" echoed a voice like thunder, reverberating through the fabric of my fear. The trees grew taller, their gnarled roots carpeting the ground, weaving into strands of a web that ensnared not just my body, but my very essence, the part of me that craved solace amidst the chaos of sorrow. I held on to the lingering thought of Lila, my anchor, and then shadows poured through the cracks of my recollection. The specters cloaked in dark memory began to twirl in a macabre dance around me, whispering fragments of truths and lies that tangled into a bitter brew. "They will come for you," they intoned, weaving sin into a tapestry too intricate to easily comprehend. And yet, amidst their chanting, I discerned of others, lost souls caught in the limbo of regrets. "Lila!" I cried, desperation welling within, flinging my arms wide in appeal. The shadows danced closer, encasing me in a spire of dread, each finger extended like a skeletal promise of mayhem. They whispered my name, their voices a chorus of the damned. "You chose the darkness. You chose to forget," the the word struck me, echoing in the depths of my conscience. If I wanted Lila back, I had to confront the agony that birthed my flight. But as I steeled my resolve, the ground beneath me subtly shifted, and I felt Ida pulse thrumming in tempo with my own heartbeat, peering deeper into the abyss, a figure emerged, a vessel of shadows. Its eyes glinted with an infernal light, a vast maw stretching across its face as if eager to consume what remained of the light within me. You think you're the only one with desires? It hissed, breathing ghostly mist that coiled like smoke around my limbs. You and your memories are nothing but sustenance for this realm. A terror I had never known surged through me, yet anchored to the flickering remnants of hope, I gritted my teeth. I would not succumb to despair. I began to weave an incantation, fragments of memory releasing themselves from the tangles of guilt, positioning themselves as weapons against this malevolence. The shadows recoiled, screeching with a sound that dug nails into my sanity. In that heartbeat of rebellion, though, I glimpsed Lila again, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. She was trapped in the folds of the forest of spirits, calling out with silent screams. The more I fought against the darkness, the heavier it grew around her. Help me! She mouthed, desperation etched in every line of her small face. Lila! I shouted again, fingers clawing at the fabric of despair that enveloped us both. I strained against the constricting roots, yearning to bridge the chasm of darkness, to navigate this hellscape for a chance at salvation. But then, the evil entity leaned closer, its voice a seductive hiss laced with twisted glee. You think the memories can save you? They will only bring you deeper. With a bone-chilling grin, it stretched out a clawed hand toward Lila, darkness swirling about it like smoke silencing the cries of the fallen. I could feel its power, a grip that tightened around my throat, just when I had found the strength to break through. No. I bellowed, as if my voice alone could pierce that thick veil of horror. Lila's eyes held unwavering terror, and in that moment, the veil slipped, showing me flickers of what she had seen, the forest's twisted hunger, the memories buried beneath layers of pain. As the shadows surged forward, I clutched the core of my very being, ready to shatter this unholy illusion, but before I could channel the desperate force within, the shadows fell upon me like rain, the weight unbearable. Just as I was about to scream once more, the entity lunged, swallowing Lila whole while echoing a haunting laugh that resonated through the bounds of reality, leaving behind an icy void that seemed to mock my suffering. The last remnants of light blinked out. All that remained was a stillness too deep, too palpable, settling over the forest, the thorn still tethered to me, a grim reminder that it wasn't just the abyss that had me in its grip. Fading into existence around me were the faces of those I couldn't turn away from, the lost souls that craved vengeance, their eyes fixated on me in eternal judgment. I stood frozen, knowing the price had been paid. But was it enough? As a low moan traversed the landscape, coiling from the mouths of souls trapped within the trees, I realized I was far from alone, and the darkness only craved more. Welcome home, the shadows whispered in unison, as the ground began to tremble once more, a new horror awakening beneath. As the forest shifting towards an outcome I wasn't prepared for, my vision sharpened in realization, more than Lila's absence was at stake, my own soul hung in the balance. And then, an aberration, the laughter erupted again, echoing in my mind, as the trees began to tighten around me, drawing closer. As roots entwined around my legs, a piercing scream erupted. It was Lila's. My world shattered further into darkness. And in that swirl of despair, I felt my own screams blend with hers, threatened to vanish into the abyss. Each heartbeat surged toward a dreadful climax as a single thought erupted from the depth of fear: what else would I lose before the shadows would cease? The forest seemed to grind against itself as the laughter rolled underneath like thunder, and I was forced to accept that this was merely the beginning of my true nightmare. The laughter hung in the air like a noxious fog, suffocating any remnants of courage that lingered within me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic captive desperate to escape. I clawed at the snarled roots, each tendril wrapped tighter, pulling me deeper into the thrumming darkness. As I sank into despair, memories began to swirl chaotically around me, visions of Lila entwined with faces of the lost souls, their eyes pleading a reflection of my own guilt: help us. They whispered, their voices melding into a sinister symphony of despair. I dared to look closer, and their expressions transformed from anguish to stark horror. Each face seemed familiar, faces of children stolen too soon, each one a reminder of innocence ripped away. My stomach twisted as I recognized Oni Boy, who had mysteriously vanished years ago, a friend I had played with, long before the darkness overwhelmed our lives. Why did you let this happen? His voice crystallized in the gloom. You could have saved us. No. I tried. I shouted, desperation clawing at the frayed edges of my mind. I never wanted this. But my words hung heavy, suffocated by the shadows that seemed to laugh in wicked delight. You and your memories are the feasts we crave, the entity crooned, shifting before me, its myriad eyes glistening like shards of broken glass reflecting a kaleidoscope of suffering. But oh, the joy you bring us, the pain you harbor is a delicacy. With a sudden jolt, the roots constricting around my legs released their grip, but even that fleeting freedom morphed into dread as the ground beneath me began to shift violently. The earth trembled with an insatiable hunger, pulling at my feet, the ground crumbling into a gaping abyss. From this chasm unfurled wisps of thick, oily darkness, swirling upwards in frenzied tendrils that sought to claim what little light remained. Run! A voice cried out from within the abyss. It was Lila, the familiar lilt that once filled the air with life, now draped over my soul like a shroud of despair. My heart sat heavy, split between the instinct to flee and the yearning to grasp her hand once again. The torn landscape erupted in chaos as the trees groaned under the weight of unseen birds, a cacophony of those trapped within the locusts of despair. I barely discerned figures stumbling from between the roots, eyes wild, skin pallid. They reached for me, mouths moving in silent screams, mimicking what I had just witnessed, a grotesque charade of the lost. As I stumbled back, a realization hit me beneath the waves of panic. I was not just an observer. Not his torment sought to ensnare me into its dark tapestry of despair. It had collected the broken pieces of my mind, thriving on my fear. And I began to feel the weight of those lost lives, those bittersweet childhood laughs all ripe to be devoured. Lila! I yelled, the sound ripping from my throat. I was certain I had seen her form slipping further into the maw of the abyss, her light flickering like a candle struggling against the wind. Each heartbeat echoed with urgency as I grappled with the thorns binding my consciousness, unwilling to lose her to this hell's cape. Help us! Echoed the chorus once more, rising into a crescendo that reverberated through the dark. The shadows coiled around my heart, tangling with each descending truth. You are one of us now, they whispered, their voices like knives trailing across my skin. You will never escape. With strength I didn't know I possessed, I tore away from the darkness threatening to suffocate me. I plunged deeper into the swirling chaos, the air thick with despair and the fog of lost memories. My mind raced from image to image, playgrounds splattered with shadows, echoes of laughter darkened by solemn memory. I felt them clawing for retribution. Can you hear them? The entity taunted, its form shifting rapidly, a visceral beast of flesh and regret. They want justice. We only ask you to embrace your past. As it spoke, the ground beneath us rumbled ferociously, and I fought to maintain my grasp on reality. A force unlike any I had encountered before surged from the abyss, pulling me toward its depths, luring the last barrier of my will. I felt my spirit teeter, close to surrendering to despair. No! I bellowed against the clamor of nightmares. With every ounce of strength, I forged ahead, eyes fixed on Lila. But she remained ensnared within an area of intricate webs spun with shadows, her figure growing blurrier as the distance stretched between us, and that was when I saw a distinct shadow breaking free from the felled trees. It raced toward me, and with horror, I realized that it was not Lila emerging from the darkness. Instead, it was the twisted form of another one whose eyes burned not with the shimmer of lost hopes, but with a furious vengeance. With no time to react, I was thrust aside as the entity lunged once more, shadows wrapping around its form like living flesh. You will pay for what you have done. It screamed as it dove toward me, unfurling dark claws that seemed to pierce the very fabric of my existence. In one horrifying moment of clarity, I caught a glimpse of the chaos unraveling, Lila's figure disappearing into the depths, her scream puncturing the fog of memories, echoing endlessly. All logic escaped me, and as I braced for the impending blow of darkness, a fragmented thought blazed through: what sacrifices would I have to make to reclaim her? And then the shadows consumed me, a wave of icy despair washing over every layer of my being. As consciousness flickered like a dying ember, I realized with dread that the true horrors were just beginning to unravel, and whatever lay ahead promised to tear apart the slender threads of reality itself. The darkness tightened its grip, a suffocating shroud that pulsed with an insatiable hunger. As I felt the shadows consume me whole, the world around me began to bleed into an abyss, each sound morphing into a dissonant tune resonating through my skull. The chilling sensation of ice-cold breath grazed my neck, and I spun around, heart racing, desperate to find something, anything, to anchor me. "Not yet," a voice rasped from behind me, deep and smooth like velvet hiding the jagged edges of glass. I turned, the figure barely visible through the coiling mist, its eyes gleaming like malevolent stars. "You must see what lies ahead. Before it claims you, before it claims her." In that fleeting moment of dreadful recognition, I understood the embodiment of malice before me, a twisted wraith thriving on the anguish I felt. "What do you want from me?" I croaked, the hope in my voice smothered by dread. "Freedom," it replied, smoothing a hand down its featureless face, as if attempting to summon a visage from the void. "And understanding. Discover the truth buried behind your memories, and perhaps Lila can be saved." My heart thudded painfully in my chest as fear knotted itself tighter. "Show me," I shouted, desperation fueling the words. I was lost, and time grew thin. Lila's calls echoed faintly, a mere whisper carried by the winds of torment. With a slow, sweeping motion, the wraith beckoned, and the shadows shifted, revealing a jumbled montage of visions. Each image unfurled like a nightmarish tapestry, vibrant yet drenched in gloom. I was thrust into scenes of my childhood: the playground, once bathed in laughter, now a stilled graveyard, a familiar tree house, its windows shattered like dreams torn apart. "Do you remember this place?" the wraith urged, its voice dripping with false earnestness. I nodded, though dread coiled tightly around my throat. As I gazed upon the ghostly scene, a chill fluttered through my veins. The echo of laughter, once sweet, turned cruel as the shadows crept from the corners, weaving tendrils around the innocence captured in those memories. Children played, their faces warped in grotesque distortions, eyes hollow and filled with torment, not joy, but despair. No, not here. I gasped, and yet I was rooted to the spot, an observer forced to witness the unraveling of my sanctuary. The kids, once gleeful and light-hearted, transformed. I could see their faces splitting, twisting into masks of agony, mouths sewn shut as they were pulled into the ground, into the yawning maw of the very darkness I feared. "Why are you showing this to me?" I demanded, but the wraith merely chuckled, soft and haunting, like leaves rustling in a graveyard. "Because you must face your own darkness," it hissed. "The debt you owe can't be ignored. The soul's hunger for recompense. Will you let them suffer forever?" A blinding flash swept through my mind, illuminating fragments of unburied memories: the day Lila and I laughed under the veil of that very tree house, the promises we made. Each laughter rang hollow now, distorted as if mocking me from the abyss. But I didn't know. I couldn't have saved them. I was just a child, were you? The wraith stepped closer, its breath a putrid wind. "What do you truly remember? What lies buried beneath your facade of innocence?" The tether to my childhood snapped. In a cataclysm of recognition, I relived the last day I played there, the boys daring each other to venture further into the woods, the sinister laughter that had chased us, echoing until we'd lost our way. Was that the last time I saw them? Or did I simply forget I had chosen to forget? Suddenly, the trees of my memory began to shift, their twisted roots creeping outward like grasping fingers. I could feel the weight of the past bearing down on me, revoking my few precious memories. The laughter morphed into desperate cries, and I clutched my head, feeling the pressure mount as the world grew darker. No. Stop! I screamed, my voice cracking against the oppressive weight around me. But the shadows seemed to pulse with excitement, hungry for my despair. Relentless in their pursuit of the truth I feared. Through the shadows, I caught glimpses of small hands reaching out, children I could almost recognize, faces shrouded with tears and screams smothered by darkness. Lilith's voice floated to me again, the tender fragments of it splintering into something jagged and mournful. "You left me," she cried, despair tinging her tone. "Lila." I gasped, reaching for her voice, but the darkness swallowed it up, leaving only silence in its wake. "Embrace it," the wraith urged, its eyes gleaming with malicious glee. "The guilt, the burden, the choices you buried deep in your heart, it binds you to this unending cycle of suffering. Will you break free?" Fear nagged at the fringes of my consciousness, and I fought the temptation to succumb. I couldn't let it win. But just as I resolved to resist, the ground trembled violently. Chasms opened beneath me, silhouettes clambering upwards, clawing desperately at the surface of my reality. They were the lost encapsulated in a maelstrom of regret, clawing to escape the prison my fear had erected. As they surged toward me, a rush of raw energy shocked through the air, a memory so potent it made me stagger. I recognized it, a brief smile exchanged before the boys went to play their final game, then, abruptly, a cold, seeping darkness clamped over my heart, squeezing fiercely, freezing me in place. The boundaries of my reality flickered, movement twisted through the shadows, and the wraith's laughter darkened, melding with the wheezing cries from below. Suddenly, I felt the whisper of tiny fingers around my wrist, tightening painful, an ethereal grip that burned with the weight of despair. No mere figment of my imagination, something or someone was reaching for me, pulling me closer to the opening beneath a promise of oblivion just out of reach, and in that singular, instant moment, when the essence of my childhood and the unyielding grasp of the past collided, I heard Lila's voice, clearer now, shattering through the clamor. "Save us. You have to claim the darkness, or let us all perish." The pressure mounted as one last grasp of instinct ignited within me. But the truth had never been so terrifying. How far was I willing to go to rescue her? What would need to be sacrificed in this unholy pursuit? Fate held its breath, waiting to see if I would surrender or fight against the insatiable grip of the deepening abyss. The choices swirled and crashed around me like venomous waves, and before I could muster another thought, the ground beneath cracked wide open, releasing an otherworldly scream that dragged me under, heralding the dawn of a horror I had yet to comprehend. As I fell into the chasm, the grip of shadows tightened around me like a vice, pulling me deeper into their embrace. The landscape shifted in a nauseating blur, a non-Euclidean realm where the laws of nature twisted and darkened, the air slick with the scent of decay. As I tumbled further, the memories I had fought to suppress began to surface, unspooling like a grotesque film reel before my eyes. The first image slapped me across the face: a vibrant picnic beneath the same tree house, a happy Lila with her radiant smile, laughter that had once filled my heart now twisted into a shriek of despair. The joyous moments morphed into vibrant horror, the sun-blackened children in an endless spiral of torment. The laughter turned to screams that echoed endlessly, clawing at my sanity, drowning me in their anguish. I landed softly, easily, though I knew not how. Around me, shadows ebbed and flowed, coiling together like serpentine veins. My heart hammered in my chest, uncertain whether I was dead or trapped in a waking nightmare. I stumbled to my feet, breath quaking in my throat, and glanced around. The place was an uncanny replica of the playground, yet it shimmered with a grotesque beauty, glimmers of a world long lost trapped beneath layers of darkness. "Hurry," a hoarse whisper echoed. I spun, recognizing the voice, a familiar blend of warmth and guilt. It was her, Lila, peering from the darkness, her face marred with shadows that danced wickedly across her features. "They are coming. We're running out of time." Panic surged like ice through my veins as I glanced over my shoulder. Shadows began to thrash violently, the air growing heavy, thickening with an unsettling dread. I took a step back, tears welling in my eyes as I tried to make sense of the chaos around me. "Lila. What's happening? Where are the others, stuck?" "They're trapped out there, just like us," she said, reaching out with trembling hands, ethereal fingers stretching from the spectral fog. We need to find the truth, and it's buried beneath this place. You must remember, as her words washed over me, the memories surged once again, the game of hide and seek that had sealed our fate, the shrieks of laughter abruptly replaced by a chilling silence. The needle of dread pricked at my mind, pulling forth flashes of the dark figures we had seen in the wood, shadowy shapes with eyes like burning coals, watching, waiting as we played, drawing us deeper into a web we could not comprehend. I remember the woods. We were warned to stay away. I thought it was just a story, I muttered, my voice cracking as I gripped Lila's hands tightly. But we went anyway. We didn't listen, yes. You have to accept it, she insisted, her features shifting as if she were losing substance. The shadows crept closer, hungry and insatiable. It's the only way to free them. To free me. As her words settled, I felt an odd thrumming in my chest, a pulse, a dark and primal rhythm entwined with the very essence of the shadows surrounding us. The truth buried deep within me began a slow resurrection, twisting and turning, carving echoes of forgotten promises that pulsated to the beat of my fear. Suddenly, a deep growl resonated from behind, a guttural sound that sent shards of ice down my spine. I spun around to see a massive creature emerging from the shadow, a grotesque amalgamation of nightmares, its form flickering between dimensions like a holograph of despair. Eyes bulged from unnatural angles, an endless maw of teeth threatening to consume every ounce of light in the abyss. The air felt icy as it drew nearer, suffocating my senses and clawing at my very essence. Let go of her. I screamed, the words exploding from me with a fervor fueled by desperation. You don't own us, you have what it takes to break the cycle, the wraith's voice echoed from the depths of the creature. Claim your darkness or perish alongside her. Your choice will seal her fate. Lila's grip on my hand slackened as she leaned back fearfully, the darkness swallowing her silhouette inch by agonizing inch. Please. Save me. Emboldened by her words yet paralyzed by terror, I felt a storm of emotions surge within me: guilt, shame, love, all intertwined in a nightmarish embrace. The creature advanced, jaw unhinging in an inhuman manner, and I realized I had little time left to act. Motivated by a newfound resolve, I tore my gaze from the encroaching shadow and turned it inward. What was buried? I whispered to the swirling storm within. What was the cost we paid? In that moment, the memories of those lost children collided with mine, an avalanche of emotions bringing forth the realization, I had left them behind, I had been too scared to face the truth. And now the price was demanded. The shadows around me began to manifest, forming a bridge made of lost voices pleading for release. A cacophony of cries surrounded me, urging me to understand, to accept, to confront the darkness I had avoided for far too long. But just as the realization took root, the creature lunged, its serrated teeth aimed at Lila, hungrily lunging for the last flicker of hope. I screamed, a primal roar of fear and grief, hands reaching out to stop the inevitable. And in that decisive heartbeat, the foundation of my reality began to crack under the weight of my choices. Accept it. The wraith screeched, echoing through the cacophony. Claim what is yours and unleash the horror, or let this child perish. And I felt the shadows flowing around me, seductive and dark, promising power beyond my comprehension. Could I embrace the darkness? Could I surrender to it for the sake of saving Lila, the child from my past? As I prepared to make the irrevocable choice, the fanged maw of the creature opened wide, and the screams of loss filled the air, drowning out everything else. A maelstrom of time split between regret and salvation. Just as I was about to utter those forbidden words, to claim what was mine, Lila's face flickered one last time, time suspended. As I drifted closer to the edge of oblivion, I raised my voice to scream my final decision, but the shadows twisted and shrieked, a torrent of rage and misery exploding around me, drowning my home in darkness before my choice could escape my lips. And as the very fabric of existence frayed, I was enveloped by something far more terrifying than the last whispers of forgotten children. The realization of becoming a part of this darkness, a vessel of horror, forever lost and chains binding me to despair. But the worst of it came when a chilling voice cut through the chaos, unmistakably familiar, and whispered from within the shadows, "Welcome home." I awoke gasping, the taste of ashes in my mouth and the last remnants of dark laughter still echoing in my mind. I was back in my living room, the shadows retreating just beyond reach, but something was painfully different. The air felt electric now, charged with an energy that throbbed just beneath the surface. I staggered to my feet, looking around as if the very walls might betray the horrors of my last moments. The familiar sounds of my home were warped and sinister. The clock ticked rhythmically, but it felt like a countdown to something monstrous. I was a breath away from clutching my head, trying to shake free of the remnants of my fevered nightmare, yet I felt an oppressive weight pressing down on me, a knowing that made my bones ache. "Lila!" I screamed, my voice breaking, echoing into the suffocating silence. There was no answer, only the cold, chilling draft that whispered through the corners of the room. "Please, not again." Panic clawed at my throat as the shadows once again flickered and curled around me like a malignant fog. Stumbling toward the staircase, I recalled the whispers, the endless voices clamoring for recognition. "It's not over," they had echoed, and dread surged as realization struck. I hadn't merely wandered through nightmares, I had stitched myself into a tapestry of their anguish. Lila and the faces that haunted me were no longer just memories, they were entwined with my very soul, interwoven with the darkness I had tried so hard to escape. I reached the door at the end of the hallway, a sense of foreboding wrapping around my heart like a vice. This was where everything began, where I had given in to the allure of the unknown. I grasped the doorknob, feeling its chill seep into my veins, and pushed it open, the creaking hinges beckoning me into the deepening black. Inside, chaos unfurled with every step. It was a warped version of the childhood room I longed for. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing scrawls of names, those who lost their way and could never go home. My heart raced, recognizing each name etched in scorn: Adam, Lily, Sam. The shadows surged and twisted within the confines of my mind, a cacophony of voices clawing for release, demanding recognition. "Help us. You left us." They cried, their cries mingling with Lilith's haunting melody, taunting me to confront the monster I had become. I felt the darkness pulse through the air, vibrating against my skin, begging for sustenance. I had been scapegoating my memories, and now they were rising as a horrific reality. The more I denied them, the stronger they became. Fueled with desperation, I slammed my hands against the wall, feeling the anger radiate outwards, and howled, "I know. I know what you want." The shadows shifted, sliding back into the darkness, revealing a mirror amongst the debris, a cracked, grotesque reflection of myself glaring back, but behind me, I saw them. The children, the lost souls, all clinging to my darkness like moths drawn to a flame. My heart clenched. Just then, the mirror splintered into 1,000 shards, and within each fragment, I caught glimpses of their eyes. "You can never leave," they murmured together, their faces merging into an amalgam of anguish. "You need us." I felt the truth of their words wash over me like fire and ice. Any attempt to escape would merely bind me closer to this cursed existence. The fabric of reality around me twisted in agonizing clarity, and a pull deep within my core beckoned to me: "Embrace it, or we will take her." I turned back to the shadows, their forms entwining sinuously, dark tendrils reaching out as if to consume me whole. But I could also see her, Lila, at the very edge of my awareness, her face a mirror of pure sorrow, steady and unyielding. "That I will not let you take her from me." I screamed, a primal roar born from the depths of my despair. I felt the dark surge within me twisting and writhing, urging me to give in, to surrender. But deep down, I heard her voice again, clear, ringing through the chaos: "Save us." It echoed, a haunting mantra that pulled at my heartstrings with the weight of everything we had lost: the carefree nights, the stolen laughter, the untouched dreams. The shadows whispered sweet nothings, but Lila's face burned bright in my memory. I knew what I had to do. Clenching my fists, I howled to the darkness, "You can have me, but I will not lose her." In that instant, the ground began to tremble, a fracture splitting between fear and rage as I hurled myself forward, embracing the darkness that swirled around me like a tempest of ghosts. I felt their memories surge through me, very scream, every ounce of sorrow rising to the surface. I wrapped myself in their anguish willingly, tearing down walls built out of denial. Then there it was, the final choice: salvation or damnation, retribution or surrender. But this time, My heart remembered what I may have tried to forget: the kindness beneath the sorrow, the laughter beneath the tears, the grief that had birthed them. Take me! I roared into the void, and the dark figures erupted into a wild dance, swirling around me in a whirlwind of grief and hope. But let her go. The ground shook violently as the shadows intertwined and wrapped around me, enveloping my being in a wicked embrace. The presence of Lila flickered just on the edge of my perception, a torchlight flickering in the tempest, as the wretched shadows hooped and clawed at my resolve. But just when I thought the darkness would claim me whole, I felt Lilith's warmth brushing against my skin, a rush of light piercing through the chaos, mingling with the shadows, weaving a fabric of identity, of remembrance, of belonging. Fear not. You are not alone. Lilith's voice drifted through the suffocating gloom, anchoring me like a guiding star, reminding me how love could battle through the blackest shadows. With one final surge of clarity, I tore through the veil of darkness binding me, reaching for the flicker of light, retreating from the maddening embrace of despair, and then everything shattered. A kaleidoscope of color burst forth from the shards, cascading around me, the echoes of lost voices crescendoing into a symphony of grief and freedom, sewing together the tapestry of our existence. As the reality shifted and spun inside out, I rooted myself in the radiant image of Lilith's face, the warmth illuminating every shadow until the darkness collapsed into nothingness. But as my focus sharpened, the familiar scene of my home reformed around me, warm and glowing. Yet the chill didn't fully dissipate, and as I turned, a single thought gripped my heart with the force of a vice. I was free, but the shadows still lingered. The darkness hadn't vanished yet, it was now woven within me. Then, standing at the edge of my living room, bathed in light, I caught a glimpse in the mirror, and horror set in as I read the scrawled words behind me: "You cannot escape chaos, it has claimed you." Lilith's smile flickered in the glass, and my heart raced as I whispered, "But are you truly gone?" The reply came as shadows began to spiral upward around me, laughter twisted into a chilling symphony, an echo of lost innocence absorbed into my being, leaving me with a singular truth gnawing at my core: not everything is what it seems.